They laughed at her on the yacht but stopped when the Navy destroyer greeted her at 3 a.m. The night was thick with mystery, as the yacht bobbed on the dark waters like a lone soul in a haunted sea. Laughter erupted from the luxury vessel, a seemingly innocent party carried by the gentle lapping of waves. But all eyes were drawn to her as slender figure perched on the deck's edge, illuminated by moonlight. Her porcelain skin glowed unnaturally, reflecting the flickering lights of the yacht. A hush fell over the crowd, their laughter dying like the flicker of a candle. Who was she? Friends exchanged glances, eyebrows raised, thoughts running wild. The air crackled with tension. She held herself with a strange grace, as if the water whispered secrets to her that none could hear. A glint of something odd and unspoken promise lingered in her eyes, as she stared into the depths below. Suddenly, the sound of a low rumble broke the stillness, vibrating through the air. It was distant at first but grew louder, like a beast awakening. And then it appeared, slicing through the water with terrifying speed, a Navy destroyer, its silhouette looming large against the skyline. The yacht erupted into chaos. Drinks spilled, laughter turned to screams, and confusion took hold like a vice. What brought the military out at this hour? Did they know something the partygoers didn't? The slender woman remained still, her gaze fixed, unflinching. Whispers broke through the clamor, a curious question flaring in the minds of those aboard. Was she the target? Or perhaps she was the answer? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. And just as abruptly as it arrived, the destroyer's spotlight shone down, blinding the deck in brilliant white. Gasps filled the air. The laughter had vanished completely now, replaced by palpable fear and confusion, the kind that wrapped around your throat like a tightening noose. Yet, the woman remained. She turned slowly, unbothered, and when she raised her hand, people's collective breath caught. What was she signaling? Was it a warning or a call? The sea seemed to still, as if waiting for her next move, every eye glued to her, hearts pounding. As the spotlight flickered, revealing her full form dressed in a flowing black gown that seemed to billow like smoke, the tension hung thick. The yacht's laughter transformed into shocked silence, as murmurs of disbelief spread like wildfire. Who was she? And what tangled fate awaited them next? The spotlight pulsed, fading in and out, as if it battled against the heavy fabric of the night. In that frozen moment, time seemed irrelevant, only the woman's stillness held any weight. She began to lower her hand, and everyone braced themselves, unsure of what would come next. A voice echoed across the waters, distorted yet piercing. Identify yourself. The command came from the destroyer, urgent and commanding. The laughter from the yacht felt like a ghost now, haunting the uneasy present. Guests exchanged wild glances, frantically searching for answers, hoping for reassurance that they weren't caught in a nightmare. She remained calm. As the glow of the light intensified, illuminating her features, something about her was unnervingly serene. I'm not a threat. Her voice sliced through the tension like a serrated knife, confident and almost melodic. But you're not safe here. The crowd murmured, wondering if the beautiful stranger was a harbinger of danger. Gasps erupted as she took a step closer to the rail, seemingly daring gravity to claim her. Listen to me, she continued, her gaze sweeping over the astonished faces. They're coming. What do you mean? Who is coming? A man shouted from the back, his bravado undercut by the tremor in his voice. The woman's eyes flickered across the dark, vast ocean, as if she could see something lurking below the surface. Fear drizzled into the atmosphere, thickening it with layers of uncertainty. As if responding to her words, a rumble began to ripple beneath the water. The yacht swayed violently, sending drinks flying, and people scrambling to find their footing. The laughter was gone now, replaced by frantic screams and cries for help. A cold chill raced down spines as a sense of impending doom descended, a feeling that something was about to emerge, something far worse than they could have imagined. "Get off the yacht!" The warning escaped her lips, urgent and desperate. She finally moved, diving back into the chaos around her. The partygoers began to retreat instinctively, their bodies bumping into each other as they formed a wave of hysteria. Behind them, the destroyer-esque commander scrambled on deck, shouting orders that were swallowed by the cacophony. "This is a secure area. Restrain the guests." The woman turned again, her movements swift and fluid. "You don't understand," she yelled, her voice cutting through the noise. "You can't stop it." Her eyes glinted with something that could be interpreted as fear or perhaps an unsettling urgency. A figure broke free from the shadows at the back of the yacht. It was a tall man with a wild look, eyes darting as he approached the chaos. "They think they can hide?" he screamed, his voice barely audible above all the clamor. "But they will find us. You must trust me. This isn't just a party anymore." The woman cried out, the weight of her words sinking in as everyone fell still. The tension morphed from confusion into realization, a collective awareness settling over the crowd. As the first crashing wave struck the yacht, splintering wood and shattering norms, gasps turned to cries of terror. With the spotlight still blazing, they all realized the water wasn't just a place of leisure, it was a battlefield. What loomed beneath? The night was far from over, and the heart of the storm was only just beginning to reveal itself. The wood of the yacht groaned under the weight of panic. Shouts turned to cries, and the guests scrambled for exits that felt useless against the impending doom that swirled like a tempest around them. The woman stood defiantly at the rail, her silhouette sharp against the chaos. She was no longer just a stranger, she was the only lifeline in this boiling sea of fear. "Get to the main deck. We need to spread out," the tall man shouted, his voice cutting through the fog of terror. With the urgency of someone who understood the threat, he lunged toward the nearest group, grabbing them by their arms. "Now! Move!" A couple stumbled past her, their fear palpable, sweat dripping down their faces. The woman held her ground, her eyes fixed on the churning black water below. The edges of reality seemed to warp as twinkling stars faded behind darkened clouds. Shadows lurked, inching ever closer. "Listen to me," she bellowed, attempting to harness the panic, but words were swallowed by the chaos. "It's not just the waves, it's what's beneath them." The swell of water erupted, more violent and unpredictable than anything they had ever experienced. Tentacle-like shapes danced beneath the surface, teasing the edges of sanity. The spotlight flickered wildly, searching, illuminating fragmented faces filled with horror and disbelief. "Look!" someone screamed from the left. They turned in unison, eyes wide, to see a dark mass rising up from the depths, a colossal form, glistening and monstrous. Gasps ripped through the crowd as the realization sank like an anchor. It wasn't the sea creature stories of old. It was something worse, something they had pushed to the dark corners of their minds, a menace reawakened. "You provoked it," the woman shouted at the crowd, desperation lacing her voice. "Your laughter angered it. Now it wants blood." Beneath her words, a pulse reverberated through the yacht, awakening an earth-shattering roar from the water. A surge of swirling chaos arose, crashing against the hull, creating splinters and screams in one brutal concert. Their laughter had become their shackles, binding them to this fate. Amid the chaos, the tall man returned to her side, panting. "What do we do?" he gasped, his bravado crumbling. "In the water," she stated, more sure than she felt. "We have to get ahead of it. We need to draw it away from the yacht." Distracted. Before he could respond, she turned, her eyes locking with his, a silent agreement passing between them. They didn't have time to question the madness of her plan. In the next moment, she was moving, jumping into the water below, the chill biting her senses as she sunk beneath the surface. The crowd gasped as they watched her disappear. The tall man was at her heels, drawn by something deeper than fear, a connection that seemed to spark in the dark. They hit the water together, the world above transforming into a blur of sounds and lights, engulfed in trauma. Suddenly, the ocean trembled again, deeper this time. A pulse of energy surged up to greet them, something ancient and primal awakening with a vengeance. As they surfaced, gasping for air, the dark shape twisted violently beneath them, sending up monstrous waves that sent the yacht rocking dangerously. Above, screams and panic loomed, echoing against the stormy backdrop of confusion. "Look out!" he screamed, recognizing the wave of dark intent looming beneath them. The two of them fought against the currents, adrenaline coursing through their veins. They could either give in to the rising tide or take a stand, but what awaited them was still shrouded in darkness, far beyond their understanding. "Find the river," she yelled, her voice barely a whisper over the chaos. "We don't have much time." Only then did they realize there was more at stake than their own survival. The lives of everyone on that yacht rested precariously on their next decision. What had they unleashed? And what would they have to sacrifice to stop it? The water closed around them, cold and unyielding, but neither had time to think of the biting chill. They kicked with all their strength, the thrum of the dark mass beneath them growing closer, more menacing. The yacht above was a mere spark in a storm of desperation. "Over here!" She pointed toward a glimmer of light dancing nearby, its source hidden from view. It could be the way out, or it could lead them into the heart of the monster. Yet every fiber in her body urged her forward, drawn by the flickering promise of escape. He followed, instinctively trusting her without question. The icy water tugged at them, pulling them downward with each frantic movement. They darted among the waves, the swell threatening to swallow them whole. Above them, the yacht loomed, misplaced confidence replaced now with desperate shouts. Was it too late? A guttural roar shattered the chaos, echoing through the water around them. They froze, hearts pounding like drums, as the dark mass broke the surface again, revealing jagged teeth glistening like daggers. "Swim!" she screamed, her voice slicing through the fear. They pushed themselves harder, muscles burning, but the feeling of being hunted hung heavy in the water. For each stroke forward, the dark form shadowed them, a ceaseless predator, relentless in its pursuit. The surface shimmered above, an unreachable promise, while they remained ensnared in its twisted depths. "Do you really think we can outrun that?" he shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "Distance! We can create distance! Just trust me!" she urged, her determination igniting something deep within him. They darted between stiff currents, flinging themselves toward the distant light, growing closer yet seemingly miles away. Suddenly, another roar echoed, louder, more furious, sending tremors through the water and into their bones. The whirlpool of horror beneath surged forward, and dark tendrils lashed toward them, snapping violently like angry vipers. "Now!" she shouted, movement surging through her limbs. She could feel the answer rising as she connected the frantic dots in her mind. This creature, this nightmare from the deep, was following them. And if they could turn it away, they could save everyone. "To the river! The river!" Her heart raced faster than her thoughts. She pulled him toward the light, but a surge from below thrust him back, sending him tumbling. "Hold on!" she gasped, grabbing his arm and pulling him close. The connection between them seemed to pulse in the chaos, a lifeline against the fury of the sea. They reached the light, a narrow passage bubbling with energy. It felt alive, desperate, inviting. Hope ignited, pushing against all that hunted them. But behind them, the monstrous shape roared again, furious at being played with. It charged, a tidal wave of fury that threatened to engulf them both again. "This way!" She yanked him towards a narrow crevice, half wishing it could swallow them whole. The walls of the passage were slick, covered in seaweed that clung like a vice. They squeezed through, breathless, both exhilarated and terrified. Yet as they entered the watery path, a sudden silence fell upon them like a shroud. The chaos above faded into nothingness. They were no longer part of that world, but what lay ahead was still unknown. Then, a low rumble began to build around them, the very walls of the river bending to an unseen force. "Do you feel that?" he whispered, the wonder and fear evident in his voice. "Something is coming," she breathed, eyes wide, heart racing. What had they truly awoken? And what kind of monster awaited them just beyond the bend? They could no longer turn back. The depth of darkness was now merging with an even greater mystery. As they pressed onward, a shiver ran through her. The darkness could no longer be ignored. But there were still secrets waiting for them at the end of the river, secrets that could mean life or oblivion. What awaited in the shadows? Would it be salvation or something worse? The water surged around them, the silence only amplifying their heartbeat. She glanced nervously at him, both of them sensing the shift in the air, as if the very world was holding its breath. "We have to keep moving," she urged, fear threading her voice. He nodded, but his gaze drifted to the shadowy walls, warped and flickering with shadows that moved like something alive. The rumble grew louder, vibrating through the water, and with each pulse, the sense of impending doom churned deeper in his gut. They pressed on, hands brushing against each other, the contact a small solace in the terrifying unknown. But as they ventured further, the water grew warmer, an unsettling shift that didn't feel right. She could feel a tension surrounding them, a palpable fear that coiled tightly around her chest. Then, a faint glow appeared ahead, shimmering like a beacon. It flickered softly, ethereal and inviting. Was it an illusion? A trick of the darkness? "Look!" she gasped, pointing. His eyes widened as they swam toward the light, drawing him in like a moth to a flame. But instinct gnawed him, disbelief waging war against hope. "Wait! What if it's a trap? What other option do we have?" she snapped, frustration bubbling over. The glow intensified as they drew closer, casting eerie reflections against the rocky walls. They could make out outlines, shapes etched in the darkness, the remnants of an underwater world long lost to time. She felt the current shift, pulling her forward, urging her into its embrace. Then, they were there. The opening erupted into a vast chamber, an underwater grotto that shimmered like a dream. A peculiar landscape awaited them, filled with iridescent corals and strange formations that twisted and turned, glowing in various hues of blue and green. "It's beautiful," he whispered, all filtering through his fear. But beauty often masked danger. As they tread deeper into the grotto, a change rippled through the water. The rumble escalated, and colors twisted ominously. What once felt inviting turned into something unsteady. The beauty morphed, shadows stretching and curling like fingers reaching for them. From the depths, a deep thrum pulsed. Was it a heartbeat? Yes. A resonant pulse reverberated through the chamber, quickening the tingling sensation of dread crawling down her spine. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Just as he opened his mouth to respond, a shadow swept across the grotto, its form pulsating with energy that crackled in the water. It was massive, an unseen force looming just beyond their line of sight, dwarfed by the vastness of the caverns. She swallowed hard, terror expanding in her chest. "What is that?" Suddenly, the glow flickered, the cave plunging into darkness. In that terrifying moment, they could hear movement, something brushing against the walls, sending plumes of sediment swirling in the water. "Run!" he yelled, instinct taking over as they turned to flee. But the grotto shifted, the openings narrowing as if the walls were closing in on them. Desperation surged, and with it, a fierce determination. They clawed their way against the current, every second stretched thin as the shadows surged closer, stalking them with an insatiable hunger. "Get to the light!" she shouted, adrenaline surging as she pulled him toward a faint glimmer up ahead. Something cold snagged her ankle, dragging her down into the depths. She gasped, panic gripping her as she fought to break free. "Help! I can't!" But he was there, reaching for her, grasping her wrist with a fierce grip as he yanked her back to the surface. They burst through the barrier, gasping for air, but the pull of the water still hung onto them, relentless and hungry. What lay ahead? Would the rescue be a mirage, leading them deeper into danger? Or would the truth erupt just as suddenly as the shadows that followed? They emerged into the light only to feel a new wave of terror as a distant shape began to materialize, looming on the horizon, carrying a promise of answers or their doom. The shape drew closer, its outline sharpening against the backdrop of a sky now tinged with ominous hues. As they caught their breath, her eyes darted nervously between the distant object and him. "What is it?" she managed, her voice barely a whisper, laced with disbelief. The silhouette gained structure, revealing the form of a vessel, sleek against the water, cutting through the waves with an unsettling precision. A vessel that looked far too advanced for their world, a Navy destroyer. "Is that real?" he stammered, raking his hands through his hair in disbelief. "It's like something out of a dream." She squinted against the glow of the lights that now pulsed rhythmically from the ship, a harsh contrast to the muffled quiet of the underwater grotto. "It's not just a dream, we need to get there," she said, the adrenaline kicking back in, fueling her resolve. With newfound determination, they pushed against the current, their limbs moving in synchrony, hearts pounding in rhythm to the ominous thrumming they could still feel radiating from the grotto. The light from the destroyer acted as a guiding star, pulling them forward even as they looked back warily at the shadows lurking behind them. But as they neared the ship, dread coiled tighter in her gut. What if it was no savior? What if the very force that had chased them was now lurking just beyond the edge of brightness, waiting for them to falter? Bubbles rushed past them as they broke the surface, gasping for air. The destroyer-esque lights poured down on them, illuminating their soaked forms as they clung to the side, desperately trying to haul themselves up. Once on the deck, they found themselves staring into the faces of soldiers armed and prepared, confusion written on their stern expressions. "Who are you?" one shouted, his voice sharp like the blade of a knife cutting through tension. "What are you doing here?" They exchanged a glance, both of them wide-eyed and bewildered. We were trapped," she exclaimed, struggling to catch her breath. "In the grotto." There was something in the water. The soldier's eyes narrowed. "Did you say grotto? What did you see?" Before they could respond, a mechanical whirring erupted from the rear of the destroyer. An armored hatch opened, and from it emerged a figure clad in dark gear, a diver's suit adorned with blinking lights. "Get inside. Now!" the diver shouted, urgency shaking their voice. Without waiting for another word, he lunged toward the edge of the boat, scanning the waters vigilantly. "What is happening?" he yelled, panic rising in his chest as a low growl echoed from beneath them, rippling the surface of the water like a great beast preparing to break free. "You've just awakened something," the soldier snapped, eyes darting left and right. "It doesn't like uninvited company." She felt the ground shift beneath her as tendrils of fear coiled tightly around her. They had fled one danger, only to uncover something more terrifying. They were forced by instinct toward the hatch, inconceivably asking for safety in a world that had splintered under the weight of unknown threats. But as the diver motioned for them to follow, the water heaved violently, and from the depths, A monstrous figure surged upward. It was now or never. The choice lay before them. Plunge into the unknown abyss below or trust the enigmatic figure extending his hand from the safety of the ship. The decision blurred, a lifeline pulling in every direction. What now? She breathed, realizing time was slipping away as the creature's shadow loomed closer, scales shimmering ominously in the destroyer's light. Every second seemed to stretch painfully thin, and in that moment, one question hung above them, as chilling as the water itself. Would they gamble their lives on the unknown or surrender to the darkness lurking beneath? She took a breath, almost tasting the saltwater mingling with anxiety. "We have to go," she shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. The diver's hand was warm and steady against the wildly thrumming pulse of danger. With a final glance toward the swirling depths, he felt her pull him forward, urgency lacing their movements. They jumped into the hatch, the diver shielding them with his body, as the screams of panic echoed from above. Inside, the air was stifling, the hum of machinery replaced by a tense stillness. Glancing around, he saw banks of screens flickering with unreadable data and control panels blinking red, alarming signs of the creature's approach. The diver slammed the hatch shut behind them with a thud that resonated in his chest. "Stay close," he warned, his breath labored, eyes darting toward the now sealed door. What waited outside? Would the creature burst through at any moment? The fear gripped him, wrapping around his spine like icy fingers. "Where are we?" she whispered, her face pale and drawn. He reached for her hand, squeezing it tight. "I don't know, but if we're here, it's for a reason." The diver pushed through a narrow corridor, leading them deeper into the heart of the ship. The walls vibrated slightly, as if the destroyer itself was aware of the growing threat. Each step felt charged with energy, the kind that foreshadows an electrical storm. Suddenly, they halted outside a massive reinforced door. The diver pressed a button, and the door slid open with a mechanical hiss that felt ominous. Inside the control room, stern-faced officers were absorbed in their screens, highlighting radar scopes and maps that showcased a menacing blip straining against the boundaries of the ship's vicinity. "We've got movement," one officer snapped, his voice colder than the sea outside. "Confirm target." "What did you see?" The diver stepped forward, waving them closer. "These two just escaped from the grotto," he said, urgency still woven through his words. "What else out there?" "They crossed into territory marked by recent disturbances," another officer replied, fingers flying over keys before him. "We need intel. Now." Panic washed over her as the reality of their situation struck. Whatever had been in the grotto was probably out there waiting. The very thing that had driven them into the waters was now hunting them. We need to warn you," she blurted out. It was enormous, and I think it can." Before she could finish, an impacting sound vibrated through the hull, followed by the wailing alarm of klaxons. Darkness enveloped the room, punctuated by red emergency lights casting their shadows long and haunting across the faces of the crew. An alarmed officer shouted commands, the chaos erupting once again. "Battle stations. Prepare for confrontation." The diver grabbed her shoulder, his grip firm. "Stay together. Whatever happens, don't let go." As the crew scrambled for their weapons, the dread stirred within him, nagging at the edges of his thoughts. What had they unleashed? The tension in the air grew thick, every heartbeat echoing loudly enough to make him doubt his sanity. And then, out of the depths of the rushing murmur, came a voice soft but chilling. "It's here." Just as the temperature seemed to drop, the walls shook violently, and an ear-splitting roar pierced through the alarm, accompanied by a monstrous bang against the hull. Their eyes locked, unease pooling between them. Would they be able to turn the tide, or would they become part of the depths they feared? Something was about to break through, and time was running out. They had to act. But as they steeled themselves, a startling realization struck him harder than any blow. What if the monster was not just out in the water? What if it was inside the ship as well? The room quaked again, the metal groaning like a wounded beast. She stumbled, grabbing the edge of a console to steady herself. The diver's eyes scanned the room, flickering between the crew and the blip circling ominously on the radar. "Get back!" an officer yelled as he swiped a control panel. A heavy door slammed shut, sealing off the corridor behind them. The second stretched like an elastic band ready to snap. "Where is it coming from?" he shouted, his voice battling against the looming dread. "Port side," another officer shouted, eyes wide with fear. "It's swimming in circles, gaining speed." "What do we do?" she shouted back, trying to keep her voice steady. Sweat prickled on her brow. The sound of splintering metal echoed, making her heart stumble. Suddenly, sirens blared again, drowning out words. Panic rose, thick and choking. The diver hushed them. "We need to focus." His grip tightened on her hand, grounding her amid the chaos. "Prepare for impact." As if on cue, the impact struck again, harder this time. The lights flickered, momentarily plunging them into darkness, before the emergency lights blared back on, casting everything in a blood-red haze. She glanced around, taking in the frantic faces, their horror mirrored in her own. "Hold it together," one officer yelled, ushering the crew to action, but the air was thick with dread. Every movement felt heavy with the anticipation of destruction. Then the screens blared, a piercing alert, hull integrity compromised. A whisper of defeat swept through the crew as they scrambled to man the stations. "Is there any way to get out of here?" she pressed, glancing back at the diver. Panic surged in her throat. The thought of that creature lurking beyond the steel walls made her skin crawl. "Just hold on. We have to rely on the Navy's defenses," he replied, his voice steady. "We fight this together." Before they could process the implications of their words, the air was punctuated by a terrifying silence. It was unsettling. No alarms blaring, no shouting. Just a deep, unsettling stillness that made her skin crawl. What happened? Someone dared to whisper. The radar flickered, and that single blip became jagged and erratic. "It's right outside," the officer said, eyes darting to the reinforced windows. Then came a sound that sent ice coursing through her veins, a throaty, guttural growl that echoed through the metal ship. "It knows we're here," the diver hissed, a shiver creeping through his body. Shadows danced on the walls as if taunting them, and when they watched in dread, a series of rapid thuds vibrated through the ship, each one sending shockwaves of fear straight to her core. The creature was testing the hull, trying to get in. "Lock down all access points," ordered the commanding officer, urgency lacing his voice. The crew scrambled, hands moving as if they were trying to stave off an inevitable death. Yet, as the diver turned to her, the fear in his eyes reflected her own. What if it gets in? She felt small under the weight of that question. "Then we fight," he replied, determination settling in his shoulders, but she saw the uncertainty flicker behind his bravado. The creature roared again, and the hull shuddered. The sound was like a freight train barreling down on them all. And then, just as quickly, silence fell again, suffocating. "What was that?" someone whispered, looking wide-eyed at the screens which were now glitching erratically. More rapid thuds hit the hull, followed by something even more alarming, a series of splintering cracks. They all exchanged terrified glances. The creature was inside the ship. "Brace yourselves," the officer yelled, but no one moved. They were frozen, caught between dread and a fight for survival. Then came the piercing screech, metal against metal. The lights flickered once more. The diver grabbed her arm, wide-eyed. "Whatever happens, don't let go." Before she could respond, a monstrous tail swept through the room as if it had been waiting in the dark all along. It slammed into the controls, sending sparks flying, illuminating a moment of frozen terror. And then it was gone, leaving behind chaos, dark water seeping in. What had they released from the deep? The diver's eyes found hers. What now, if they were facing their worst nightmare head-on? The uncertainty swept through the crew again, hearts racing in unison. But there beyond the chaos, she sensed a flicker of hope. The ship still held together for now, but it wouldn't be for long. They had minutes, if not seconds. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice quieter, steadier. "Fight or flee," he said, his eyes fierce. "But we're not going down without a fight." As the creature unleashed another roar, shaking the foundations, she felt resolve crystallize within her. They were out of time. But in that split second, one thought echoed louder than the chaos. Was there any part of the creature that still lay in wait, hidden in the shadows? And a terrifying realization washed over her. What if they weren't alone? The moment passed like a heartbeat, the silence filled with a thick tension that hung over them, heavy and suffocating. Every breath felt like a betrayal, a weakness in the face of impending doom. The lights flickered again, casting wild shadows, as if the creature were toying with them, its laughter echoing in their minds. "Focus!" the diver shouted, breaking through the silence. His voice jangled like broken glass. "We have to protect the control room." She nodded, but the fear was a weight in her chest. The crew scattered, scrambling to lock down the exits. Their faces were hard with anxiety, terror etched into every line. It was a grim ballet of survival. Then the creature roared again, a sound that reverberated through the ship, sending vibrations straight to her bones. It was a challenge, a warning that they were outmatched. Steel crunched somewhere in the darkness, and she stumbled back, nearly losing her footing on the slick, pooling water. "Get those pumps running," the officer barked, but it was more than just an order. It was a plea. They had precious little time. The diver stood firm, determination hardening his features. "I'll handle the consoles. You help the others secure the hull. Don't leave me." Panic slipped through her voice, a tremor she couldn't contain. "I won't. Just trust me." He shot her a look that burned with resolve before rushing to the control panel. She held onto his words like a lifeline, trying to quell the storm building inside her. Moving around the frantically typing officers, she headed toward the nearest breach, heart hammering. The sight of dark water bubbling in from the cracks reminded her of the creature lurking beyond. Every heartbeat echoed with the questions clawing at her mind. What was it? Why was it here? She turned back to the diver, who was working feverishly. "Can you get any external support?" she shouted over the din, trying. His fingers moved like lightning across the keys, brow knitted in concentration. Then everything changed. A ship-wide alarm blared, red lights flashing maniacally. The radar screen lit up, revealing multiple blips converging on their location. "It's not just one," he yelled, eyes wide. "There are others." Her stomach dropped. "What do we do? More sailors might be coming. We can signal." He spun back to her, but before they could plan further, the hull shuddered again. A deafening crash reverberated, rattling everything around them. "Faster!" an officer screamed, panic threading through his words, as he fought to keep the door shut against a surge of water and dark shapes. Terror washed over her, as the realization dawned. If there were more of them, what chance did they really have? Their bravery was fraying under the weight of the night. Suddenly, a jagged flicker illuminated the room. A wall panel exploded, sending shards of metal flying. She cried out, flailing backward, as the diver shielded her. "Stay down," he yelled through the chaos. A massive shadow loomed behind them, cyclopean eyes glimmering with primal hunger. For just a moment, she froze, heartbeat thudding in her ears. Its breath was hot, rancid, the air thick with the scent of decay. "Ready?" He turned, sword-like nostrils flaring, his face inches from hers. There was both fear and fierce determination. There was no backing down now. She nodded, feeling a surge of adrenaline. Let us do this. Forcing herself to her feet, she scanned the room, realizing they still had a shot. The controls, the weapons, all were still operational, but only if they worked together. But just as they gathered their resolve, another crushing impact sent shockwaves through the ship, and she felt the ground till beneath them. "Hold on!" the officer shouted, gripping a console as the water rushed in even faster, swallowing up supplies, and hope. As the ship creaked precariously, she met the diver's gaze, and in that fleeting moment, she saw more than fear, she saw faith. It ignited something deep inside her. "They can't take us down. We will fight," she shouted, rallying whatever courage was left in the crew. Then the lights flickered, and one by one, faces lit up with newfound determination, igniting a fierce camaraderie. But the deafening roar of the creature shattered the moment. In the chaos, she caught a glimpse. Was that another figure darting in the shadows? Not just the creature, but something else lurking, waiting? Just before the darkness swallowed them whole, she made a decision to not face the looming darkness alone. But as she turned, another startling realization crested. What lay beyond the surface was even more terrifying than they could ever comprehend. "Together!" she yelled, but would it be enough? And in that moment, everything shifted once more. Was there truly worse lurking beyond the walls of their sinking steel sanctuary? The roar echoed through the ship, vibrating against its metal frame as they braced for the inevitable. Time seemed to stretch like taffy, fear coiling tightly around each heart. She turned, spotting the diver, whose face was etched with fierce determination. "We need to set up defenses. Arm the crew," she shouted. The moment fanned her courage, igniting the flickering resolve within the others. With renewed purpose, she rushed to the control panel. Fingers trembling, she activated the ship's weapons system, the screens lighting up with ominous promises of defense. The diver moved quickly, barking orders, rallying the frightened crew. Her heart raced as she saw fear transform into something stronger. They were no longer just passengers, they were a united front against the dark tide of terror. "Get those doors sealed," he yelled, his voice cutting through the encroaching darkness. Crew members scrambled, their hands and feet moving faster now, urgency mixed with tenacity in their every action. The hulking shadow battered against the hull again, and she felt the ship tremble beneath the impact. The wall shuddered. "It's getting in!" an officer shouted, desperation brimming in his voice. "Not if we stop it first," she answered, adrenaline surging through her veins. Her eyes landed on the diver, and they exchanged a glance filled with silent understanding. They were ready to face whatever horror awaited. With a booming crash, the creature surged against the hull, cracking steel like tin foil. Water burst through a breach, flooding the compartment with cold terror. "Form a barrier," she screamed, her voice rising above the chaos. They needed to act, to hold their ground. "Ready!" the diver called back, weapons primed. The crew responded in synchrony, determination shining through fear as they positioned themselves along the walls. The air felt electric, a palpable mix of dread and duty. Then silence fell, a heavy blanket draping over them. It was deceptive. Everyone held their breath, eyes darting toward the gaping shadows behind the reinforced doors. What awaited them? Suddenly, a tremendous crash echoed from the rear corridor, caused by the creature's massive form pushing against the metal hull. Dark water gushed in like a monstrous wave, shrouded by resignation and fury. They were not helpless. They were not afraid anymore. "Now! Fire!" the diver commanded, as the crew let loose a barrage of shots. The lights flickered, the noise deafening as the echoed shots rang out. The creature roared, a sound that reverberated through solid steel, its wrath palpable. They could see it twisting and thrashing just outside the door, dark scales reflecting the warning lights above. "Keep firing!" she yelled, aiming with precision. Fear melted into focus, adrenaline fueling her fight. But the weight of their situation pressed down like a thick fog. Would it be enough? The blips on the radar shifted, thick shadows swirling beyond the breach. "More are coming!" an officer shouted, eyes wide with terror as the screens lit up with approaching signals. "They're here," she murmured, a newfound determination igniting within her. "Together," she repeated, voice lifting over the din the crew roared back, solidarity enveloping them like a cloak. She could feel the warmth of their unity, a collective stand against the unknown. The diver caught her eye, and she saw something shift in his gaze. "We push it back," he declared. "We're not running." With every ounce of strength, they hit the emergency switches. Flamethrowers, deep-sea harpoons, they armed themselves with everything the ship could muster. The tension built, the fear coiling tighter, until it seemed about to snap. "We'll fight, not for survival, but for each other," she urged, her voice fierce and unwavering. The crew rallied, positioning themselves as if forming a solid wall against the chaos. With a deafening roar, the creature lunged at the ship, and a torrent of dark water breached the hull, cascading through the ship. Panic swelled, but her heart surged. The time for fear was over. "Now!" the diver shouted, the command slicing through the panic like a knife. They let loose a barrage of fire and light and fury, carving through the water, striking against the approaching monsters. The lights flickered erratically. With a loud impact, the creature as form buckled against the ship, spewing forth seawater and darkness. Barely in control, they fought back as wave after monstrous wave crashed against them. And then it happened. A climax, a surge of energy radiated as the creatures succumbed to their onslaught. Their fire carved through desperation, their unity breaking barriers that once seemed insurmountable. "I can feel it!" she shouted as the creature let out a final, anguished roar. The dark waters roiling, battling against the steel barricade, then it surged forth, finally weakening, and slinking backward into the abyss from which it came, a menacing shadow, receding. Her breath escaped. The realization washed over her with the force of waves. They had done it. They had turned the tide, banishing the nightmares back beneath the waves where they belonged. But they were left trembling, the night still thick with tension and uncertainty. As the echoes of chaos faded, the crew stood wild and breathless, eyes wide with disbelief. "We survived," she whispered. Relief washed over her, yet there was one more task. They weren't entirely safe, not yet. "Whereas the diver?" she gasped, scanning the room, and then the dread crept back. The dark space turned colder, shadows hanging thick as they braced themselves against the void. "The breach," someone gasped, pointing toward the cracked opening. The darkness held secrets yet unfound. What else lurked just beyond their reach? With a surge of determination, she led the way through the darkness, heart pounding toward the unknown. But this time, they faced it together. As they stepped forward, the nightmare seemed far away, just shadows and whispers of a night that would eventually dissolve. Side by side, they faced the lingering darkness, not as individuals, but as a family forged in fear and fire. "Let us go home," she said, and for the first time that night, hope glimmered. Together, they stepped into the light, knowing they had transcended the fear, emerging from the darkness stronger than before. In the distance, the sunrise broke, golden rays washing over them, promising new beginnings. Today, they were alive. But lurking in the depths, a whisper remained. The shadows would never be truly gone. Not until everyone understood what had been awakened in the deep. And as they sailed toward the horizon, it became unmistakably clear. There were still stories left to tell. You need to subscribe now. You can't miss the exclusive stories coming next. Hit that bell. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this heart-stopping finale. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this thrilling conclusion. Your support matters, now more than ever.